Let me ask you a question. What is the Sabres' identity right now?
I honestly don't think they have an identity. I think they want it to be a defensive identity, but they haven't even been good at that.
And isn't that terrifying?
That's been their focus.
Wouldn't that be terrifying if they wanted their identity to be a defensive team?
Yep.
I don't think they want that 100%, but there has been a clear shift in what this team wants to be, and yet there's no defining aspect of them. They just don't have one right now. They are painfully average offensively. They are painfully average defensively, and they are painfully average in goal. And two of those things, I guess, in defense and goaltending, hey, those are improvements from last season. But that offense has withered away to just a terrifying degree.
Mediocre. It's with all the talent we have, and don't get me wrong, of course we're missing Tage Thompson, of course we're missing Jack Quinn, but this offense was looking like that even with Tage. Tage getting hurt didn't really change much about the identity of this team because it's been a whole season issue.
And I think this is where the conversation turns to Don Granato. I think it turns to him. When last season ended, there had to be a conversation between Don Granato and Kevin Adams into what they thought the next step was for this team. And I am sure that they heard the noise from the fan base that this team stinks defensively, they stink in net, something needs to be done there. Their best players, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, they are essentially anchors defensively, and if that had all been better, then this team would be in a playoff spot. And while that's true, I think I had a moment of clarity maybe where I think they went into the direction that this team, that the overall system needed a defensive overhaul. And in reality, I think they just needed individual improvement. And I think they made the wrong step, and I think you're seeing the effects of that right now. If you think about it, the fact that Tage Thompson was doing as well defensively as he was, as funny as it was, as much as we were all laughing about it, isn't that weird that he was doing that over one off season? Over one off season, he suddenly became this super responsible player. And same thing with Dylan Cousins. It was the same thing. It still is the same thing with him. He's not. How many end-to-end rushes have you seen Cousins start? How many?
Not many.
How many breakouts has he kickstarted himself? These are not the same players from last year, and it's obviously not the same team. It's funny. I was having a conversation with someone while watching the New Jersey game, and they were, we're going back and forth, and we're asking each other, he's asking, what's wrong with this team, and I'm saying it's the offense. It's just not the same as it was last year. Everybody's point totals are down. And they said, well, Jeff Skinner's still producing. And you know what? He is. Because he's like the one player that hasn't changed the way he's playing whatsoever. He's still Jeff Skinner. His defensive metrics still stink. He's still cheating the zone whenever he wants. Sometimes it's laughably bad. I think that Heischer goal, he totally gave up on the 3-on-1. He didn't cover his guy. Whatever. That's the give and take you have with a guy like that. Because guess what? He will be one of your best players. He will be one of your best offensive creators. And you don't mess with that. Because the last time you did mess with that, you stumbled on to one of the worst. You stumbled onto the worst coach in the franchise's history. And one of the worst eras in this team's history, year over year.
Jeff Skinner's play has changed a little, though. He has learned how to play the bumper, and he has 2 goals on the power play. He finally listened to us.
And isn't that annoying? You know how badly I want to come on here and commend this team for improving the power play finally? 2 goals. Jeff Skinner has 2 goals from the bumper in the last 2 games. Like, they're actually doing it now. Their power plays went 2 for 2 against New Jersey. Do you know how badly I want to talk about that instead of questioning the overall direction of this team? I hate that I have to talk about this. But it's true. Everybody looks mitigated. Dylan Cousins looks like a completely different player than last year. Completely different.
I guess, first of all, you put it a really good way in that we didn't need to overhaul our system and that we just needed individual improvement because we were the youngest team in the league. You don't need to change a system when your young players are going to get better defense over time because they're developing players.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was something else I was thinking about. How that the Sabres went from like 28th, 29th, maybe even 30th. It depends on the model in expected goals against per 60 last season. Obviously, bottom of the barrel. You want improvement from that. Ideally, you want league average, but that's a huge jump for a team that, I mean, if you're going by the New Jersey starting lineup, they're 24.6 years old on average. That team is not going to be good defensively. It's just not. They've made this jump to, depending on the model, Evolving Wild, I think, has them at 16th, and I think Jay Fresh has them at around 19th. So they're hovering around league average. And, that is a big jump. And in a way it's encouraging because at least they have the ability to do better. But at the sacrifice of being one of the most high-flying teams in hockey, is it worth it? I don't think so. When you take a step back and you look at last season, they scored the third most goals in hockey. They were one of the best offenses in the league. And they finished with 90 points with 890 goaltending, arguably the worst goaltending in the league, and some of the worst defense in the league. And they're tinkering. They chose to tinker with the offense, and not directly. It's not like they're telling these guys, don't do what you did last year. But there is a clear shift into how they're telling them to play the game. They're not cheating the zone at all. They can't get transition going. They can't get the puck from their end to the other end in a timely manner. It all started the moment that they signed Eric Johnson, and he had his opening press conference, and one of the first things he said was talking about his time with the Avalanche and how that team took a step when guys like McKinnon and Rantanen and Landeskog, that they all took steps defensively. And I remember being excited at the prospect of that. Oh, man, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, if they were able to take steps defensively, even just get to average to below average, that would be so big for this team. But it goes back to, I think, what they needed was individual improvement, and what they went for was system improvement. If you want to look at Colorado, okay, Nathan McKinnon and Gabe Landeskog and Mikko Rantanen, none of them are like Selke, especially somebody like Nathan McKinnon. None of them are Selke candidates. They're still themselves. They're still average to below average defensively. They didn't change that much. They just improved enough. Jared Bednar he never tried to mess with the cohesiveness of the offensive unit. It never happened. So that talking point has been mentioned numerous times by Eric Johnson, by Kevin Adams. Remember the Tampa game earlier this season? They win that game 3-2 in overtime. What's Dylan Cousins talking about post-game? We know we need to win these defensive battles. We know the defense needs to come first. It has been drilled into their heads. It is so obvious that their first step needs to be back, and they shouldn't even think about cheating.
Don't get me wrong. Jonah's wearing a Bills shirt, and we just watched a Bills game, but this is reminding me so much of how McDermott and co. drilled into Josh's head not to run the ball the first half of the season. And look where our offense went. And now look at this. We drilled into our offensive-minded players on the Sabres to prioritize defense and maybe, at the expense of some of our offense. And it hasn't worked out. The thing that frustrates me most is, it's basically what you've been saying, but you can get better at defense without sacrificing your offense. You just be more responsible in the zone. If we think about the Devils game, a ton of their goals were just on bad coverages. A guy was wide open in the slot, or it was a 3-on-2, and we had 3 guys on 2 of their guys. All you have to do is get either some better back checking or better coverage in our zone, and that shouldn't affect the rest of your game. But somehow it has changed the entire landscape of our game. The Sabres missed the playoffs by 1 point last year, and were one of the most fun teams in hockey to watch. Everybody in the NHL recognized that. We were one of the most exciting teams to watch. We were one of the most teams with the biggest chance of a big jump next year, and we completely changed our game. We've gotten rid of everything that was fun about our game, and that's the most frustrating part. It's not like last season where we were scoring a ton of goals, but we were losing some games because our defense just sucked. This year, we're not scoring any goals, so it's not even fun to watch them lose. At least last year, we'd get in some shootouts and be like, if we had better goaltending, we'd be fine. But this year, it's, we can't score goals to even get in the chance of a shootout. It's just, man, it is just frustrating to watch. It's, we don't have the players to turn into Lou Lamoriello's Islanders. I'll tell you that. And it kind of seems like that's what we want to do. We want to score goals and then play some good defense. Instead, we should just be piling it on. Keep scoring goals so they can't catch up.
I was so happy at the end of the Pittsburgh game for multiple reasons. Obviously, it was a big comeback, and the place was sold out, and it was you've only gotten one other crowd this season that's been sold out. But I was also happy because that's the type of game that will bring people back into the building. And there is no secret that this team has had issues bringing people back into the building for multiple reasons, okay? Obviously, tickets, super expensive now. Alex Tuck even kind of threw some shade at it on the postgame for TNT. And frankly, their home record has been bad. But you treat your fans to a third period comeback like that with a high-flying offense, guess what? You know what people are talking about? Oh, man, I got to get to another Sabres game soon.
That was
I gotta come back.
Huge for the fans. That was one of my first thoughts. And even so, then they're looking at our Sabres schedule. And, like Joan just said, they're looking, I got to get to another Sabres game. But they're like, they play tomorrow. I'm going to turn on the game and watch. I just had a lot of fun watching the Sabres on Black Friday. I'm going to watch them again. And what do? They put up absolute stinker.
And this isn't to say that I think Don Granato should influence his coaching decisions based on if it's going to bring attendance into the arena. But this is a team that has shown to play well with a more packed building. And you're trying to reestablish a fan base here. And to take away essentially their identity or to try and change it into something it's not, I think it's proven to be a misstep. It's a misstep. It's okay. Okay, I understand what Granato wanted to do. Like I said, we all wanted the same. We wanted improved defense. We wanted better goaltending. We wanted that. And we knew offensive regression to an extent was going to come.
It was inevitable.
Tage Thompson had 94 points. Alex Tuck, Jeff Skinner both had career years. Darlene had a career year. Cousins had a career year. Guys like Peterka and Quinn had really solid rookie seasons. You would expect them to build off of that, but even then, look at Quinn. He's hurt to start the season. There's some built-in regression right there.
But at the same time, Peterka's having a great year. Middlestat is having another great year. You expect some regression out of some guys, but you expect other guys to keep getting better. I mean, Benson's been pretty good for us. We still have some guys that have done better than they did last year. But an overall offensive regression was inevitable.
It's just evident that whatever they had planned for this season, whatever they wanted this team to be, it's not working. They have an identity crisis. And honestly, I do wonder what the players think. Kyle Okposo has come out multiple times this season and said, we need to be ourselves. We need to just stop worrying about how the other team's playing. We just need to be ourselves. And I do wonder, like, it can't be easy for guys that have come up, whether they've been in the NHL, the AHL, whatever developmental league they've been in, where they're all playing these high-flying offenses, scoring points, and they come onto this team, and it's a huge shift in how the coach wants them to play.
I was going to say that earlier, that most of these players have gotten to where they are today because of their offensive output, and now the coach wants them to change that. They want them to be more defensive centered and not just focus on their strengths.
I think that it's important to not freak out too much. That, like I said, I think Granato just took the wrong steps. That he looked at last year, was probably just as frustrated as everybody else for some losses. How many games did they go up early and lose late because they had no defensive structure, their goaltending was terrible, and they lost out on the playoffs because they had many of those games where they just couldn't seal the deal or they couldn't get the saves. And I'm sure it was so frustrating. I just think they took the wrong path. And it's okay because there's still time. They're still in this race somehow.
There's still
somehow.
3/4 of the season.
Somehow they're still like a 500 team.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about this like they're 5-15-2 or something. This team is still in the race. There is still time to turn this around.